Hi everybody, I'm Nick. We're really missing you guys at the hospice at the moment, so we thought we'd do something really special and read some stories for you. And today I'm going to be reading Mrs. Honey's Hat. So I'm going to be reading a story about Mrs. Honey's hat. As you can see, it's quite an interesting hat. She's got feathers and cherries and seashells, bows and all sorts of interesting things in her hat. So we're going to find out what happens. Mrs. Honey had a hat, and on Monday she wore it when she took her grandson Peter to the park. She bought him some bubblegum and sat on the bench with her knitting. Peter sat at the side blowing his bubblegum. And he thought to himself, those feathers would make my arrows fly better. So he pulled the feathers off the hat, just like this. But when he did that, his bubble gum stuck to the hat. So we'll put the bubble gum on the hat. Mrs. Honey didn't notice a thing. On Tuesday, Mrs. Honey wore her hat to visit a friend, and they sat in the garden in the shade of a tree, eating some cakes and drinking orange juice. Some birds flew down to pick up the crumbs, and they thought, oh, those cherries look good. So they flew off with them. So we'll take the cherries off the hat. Oh, sorry, Mrs. Honey. And when they flew off with the cherries, they left some eggs behind. So we'll put those on and we'll find out what happens next. Because Mrs. Honey still didn't notice a thing. And on Wednesday, Mrs. Honey spent the day at the seaside. And the sun was shining and the water was just right for paddling, and she felt ever so happy. She hutched up her skirt and she went for a little paddle in the sea. And afterwards, Mrs. Honey took off her hat and she sat in the sunshine for a little bit of sunbathing. And a hermit crab came across the sand, and he thought, that shell would make a really nice new home. So you can guess what he did. He took the shell off Mrs. Honey's hat, which is tricky to do with one hand. There we go. And in its place, he left some seaweed. So we'll put that on the hat. Mrs. Honey still didn't notice a thing. The next day, Thursday, Mrs. Honey picked up some dandelions. She was going to make herself some wine. It was very hard work. So she took off her hat and put it down on the fence in the field. Guess what was in the field? A cow. And the cow saw the hat on the fence and he thought, what beautiful big buttercups. So he took the buttercups from Mrs. Honey's hat, and when he did that, his bell fell off. And it stuck to Mrs. Honey's hat, tinkling away. But she still didn't notice. The next day, on Friday, Mrs. Honey went to see an old castle. And when she was there, it was very old, very dusty. And she was, look at those cobwebs. This place could do with a really good clean. What lives in cobwebs? Spiders. And a big black spider dropped onto her hat, and he said, hurrah! I found something really nice that will make a really good strong cobweb, a piece of lace. So he scuttled off with the lace, but when he did that, he left behind some dusty old cobweb. So we'll put that in her hat as well. Mrs. Honey still hasn't noticed a thing. It's the weekend now, And on Saturday, Mrs. Honey took a cat to a cat show. There were all sorts of cats, lots of fine ones, lots of pretty ones, lots of fluffy ones, but she hoped that hers would win first prize. An alley cat saw Mrs. Honey's hat through the window and he spotted this lovely pink ribbon. And he thought, oh, that might help me win first prize because the alley cat wasn't as pretty or as fluffy as Mrs. Honey's cat. So he pulled it from the hat and he left behind some fish bones. Not very nice, quite smelly. But Mrs. Honey still didn't notice. And on Sunday, Mrs. Honey went to church. And there's lots of people in the church, all singing the hymns, joining in. But when she walked in, they were staring at her. She was wondering, what can that be? Why are they staring at me? Perhaps it's time I bought a new hat. And when she got home, she walked past the mirror and had a little look. And what did she see? She noticed the bubble gum and the eggs, the seaweed, the tinkly bell, the dusty old cobweb and the smelly fish bones. And she thought, goodness me, I've got a new hat anyway. But she wasn't quite sure she liked it. What do you think? So that's the end of the story. We'll leave Mrs. Honey with her new hat. I hope you enjoyed the story.